This is not a real car, it's an RC model aimed to be as realistic as possible. We are going to take a look at all the details covering the auxiliary units, the electronic system, a functional water cooling system, oil circuits all the way down to the engine. This is a Mercedes SLS AMG RC model in 5th scale with as much detail and realism as possible. A time-consuming and elaborate undertaking that I've been pursuing for about 8 years. Opening the hood on such a huge model needs to impress people and leave them speechless. Let's start with the engine itself and the auxiliary units. The engine is a dummy construction containing the electric motor, a servo for functional brakes and a water pump. All of this is enclosed in the engine block along with the air intake. Now the drive belt itself is coming from a slaughtered printer as well as the pinion to drive it. Yes, the belt is driven by the small gear motor hidden in a fake alternator casing. Just as in the real car, there is also an AC pump, a steering pump and a water pump, all driven by this belt. The fake starter engine is mounted on this side of the torque tube and is just like the real thing. Now with all these auxiliary units already mounted, let's check out the rest of the stuff. Like this oil filter housing with the AMG logo on it, but we'll get to the oil lines later. Along with other fake electronic parts like wires and lines, we're done for the engine. Now let's mount this beast into the engine bay. The first thing we add are those reinforcement struts and we complete the back part of the engine bay. Check out the battery compartment as well as the brake booster in the linked videos at the end of this video. I just love the way the battery looks next to the filler neck of the working windshield water reservoir. Underneath we have the ESC controlling the speed of the electric engine. Now that we've mounted the engine, let's check out those functional water lines made out of silicone and shrinking tube. There is also this incredibly neat coolant reservoir, where we'll see actual coolant fluid in just a second. Because the real engine has a dry sump lubrication, the external oil reservoir is mounted in front of the engine, and all of the oil lines and sensors have been made to connect to the different parts on the engine. Yes, we're even talking about oil coolers and the corresponding lines. The steering fluid container is screwed directly onto the engine and supports the cover between the air intake and the oil reservoir. I had built the air filter boxes on the SLS AMG about 3.5 years ago already, but now I can finally mount them. Next to them we'll have the chassis covers and the wheel houses, which are made using foam and epoxy on glass fiber. One of the last construction steps was to make the undercarriage protection positioned between the radiator and the engine. Now we're still missing some details and a lot of painted parts, but I can make those only later, so for now let's check out the assembly. Remember I said something about actual cooling fluid? I wasn't fooling you. Now fortunately we don't need 14 liters of G11 antifreeze like in the real car, but only 110 milliliters. Now on to the finale. AMG has a one-man, one-engine principle. And this is the reason each AMG unit has a tag bearing the signature of its creator. To honor this, I temporarily finished the engine bay with this intricate but essential detail.